hail hissed and spattered its way down the chimney, fizzing and spluttering as it hit the burning coal in Tommy's room. Some rattled against the fire guard, but the hard white specks soon vanished into sooty, watery marks in the hearth, making it as spotty as Tommy's face. And now it seemed that even the weather was making fun of him. It was all too much.
Spots. Super otters, spots.
Even saying it out loud didn't make him feel any better, and only got him a "quiet up there" from his mum in the scullery below. But even worse, it had drawn his sister to his door, ready and more than willing to taunt him. Her lips, pressed close to the keyhole, seemed to make her words all the more jagged and cutting.
What's the matter, Tommy? Talking to yourself again? You know what happens to people who talk to themselves, don't you?
Yes, I do. Although for the life of him he couldn't think of anything, he liked the effect he was having on his poisonous sister.
What? Go on then. What does happen to them?
He could tell by the tone in her voice that he had taken her unawares, stolen her thunder, and for this brief moment he had her attention.
Go on. What does happen? They... You don't know, do you?
I do.
Yes? I'm not really interested, of course.
The turn people who talk to themselves into... He was struggling, and the more he tried to think, the blanker he became. If you really want to know, he said, you'll have to put your ear up close. He was stalling for time, and she knew it. He could almost see her, smirking through the door, happy in her victory. The turn people who talk to themselves? And then it occurred to him.
Speak up. I can hardly hear you.
He could tell by her voice that she was in position. The turn people who talk to themselves into?
Yes? Yes?
The turn people who talk to themselves into?
Yes? Yes?
The turn people who talk to themselves into?
Into horrible sisters who look just like you!
There was a shrieking and a clatter as the sister fell over with the shock of this outburst.
Tommy Fohl, just you wait. I'll get you back for this. Just you see. Just you wait.
But Tommy didn't hear any more. He was jumping up and down, laughing on his bed, rich in this triumph over his dreaded sister. Her rantings died away as
"Quiet, you two!"
came thundering up the stairs. This time it was their dad.
I thought this was supposed to be the season of goodwill to all men. I wish it were the season of goodwill to brothers and sisters. Why you two can't get on for once is beyond me, especially tonight of all nights. So pack it in. Do I have to come upstairs and sort you two out?
He obviously meant business.
Well? No, Dad. No, Dad. And anyway...
Her voice was all too clear through the door. She had obviously regained her composure.
I'm sure Father Christmas won't be coming to anyone who's covered in spots. So you'll have to wait for another year before he comes visiting you.
He might have beaten her this time, but she really knew how to hurt him.
I thought I said quiet. I will not tell you again.
Yes, Dad.
No, Dad.
What? I mean,
yes, Dad.
You, Elizabeth Fohl,
her Sunday name. She was really in trouble.
Get yourself downstairs now. You were told to leave your brother alone.
But, Dad, it was him. I
said right now.
Tommy took comfort in the sullen clumping upon the stairs as his sister, the unpleasant Elizabeth, scourge of these back lanes, made her defeated way downstairs. But she was right. He could see it all now. Headline news.
Tommy Fohl, a children's enemy #1, causes Santa Claus to go home to bed, lie down in a darkened room and sip whiskey. Heartbroken youngsters deprived of presents. Tommy Fohl on the run. In the early hours of Christmas Day, Father Christmas was found dead, stuck in an orphanage's chimney. The apparent cause of death was spots, contracted after visiting one Tommy Fohl.
It was all Daniel Penn's fault. Daniel Penn was a hero and a friend to all, especially if there was an exam to be avoided. For threepence, he would breathe on you, and such was his constitution of always having some transmissible disease that you were guaranteed to be off school the next day, locked in bed-bound quarantine, while the rest of the class were face down in their exercise books. This always saved a lot of wasted time learning spellings and tables, as you would never be there to be taken to task. He was always in demand, as tests were very popular with the teachers, but not with the pupils. Daniel was not a particularly attractive child. His constantly crisp shirt, coat and unravelled jumper cuffs, his green-candled, livid red upper lip gave him a ferocious look that never left him, not even in adulthood. But he was an honourable child. If you had not succumbed to the current lung-bursting malaise within 3 days, he would give you tuppence back on the third afternoon's playtime, or another blast from his germ-laden, drain-smelling breath. This time, the potency of Danny's throat had proved too strong and too late. For not only had Tommy come last in the spelling test, and had received a hand-swelling caning of particular severity from Mrs. Marchant, his falling ill at 5 minutes to home time meant that he had passed Danny's 3-day money-back guarantee. Not only this, he had missed the school trip to the pantomime and the school party, and now looked as if he was going to miss out on Christmas as well, and all because of these spots. Daniel Penn, as ever, although the cheerful carrier of life-threatening diseases, never succumbed to their symptoms and had probably had Tommy's portion of ice cream at the party as well. All of this, and being the most unsavoury and richest boy Tommy knew, there was no justice. He was even beginning to believe that it would be easier to try harder at school, but he put that down to being ill, and he would soon get over it.
So, how's my spotted dick tonight?
It was his father.
Are you going to come in, Dad? I haven't seen you for nearly a week.
Oh, sorry, our Tom. Doctor's orders. He says that whatever you've got is still contagious, and you wouldn't want me to look as bad as you do. I mean, to catch your rash.
He knew what his dad meant to say. It was just that he had this knack of always saying things in the wrong way, so that they sounded awful.
Anyway, what you been up to today? Out interesting?
No, not much. I read me comic again. Painted some pictures.
Oh, really?
His dad sounded really interested. Tommy just wished that he would come in and see him, instead of all of this talking through the door.
Let's see them. Push them under the door and I'll have a look.
He obviously wasn't scared of catching the germs on his pictures.
Oh, yeah. A boat with a sail. Lots of trees. And what's this one? Father Christmas in bed covered in spots. Oh, you're not still worried about that, are you?
There was a pause, while Tom took a long deep breath.
No!
He lied, trying to keep a sob back.
It's just that sometimes... Jack! Jack!
His mother's voice boomed up the stairs.
Your dinner's out, and the doctor's here again. Tell our Thomas.
He was only called Thomas when he was in trouble, or when his mum had her best voice on for visitors and the clergy.
Tell our Thomas
that he can have his when he's seen the doctor.
Right. It's your mum. She says that the doctors...
It's all right, Dad, I know. Tommy often wondered how all the people in Galashiels, never mind South Shields, didn't know what was going on in their house, what with all the bellowing and shouting that went on and up their stairs.
Dad, will you come up later?
He wanted to say that he missed his dad, but he knew that he would only go quiet and change the subject.
Will you?
I'll try,
said his father, as he turned and talked to the doctor at the head of the stairs. Through the door, he could hear his father say,
pretty much the same.
And,
"'Specting me right as rain in a few days."
There was a pause, a rustling, and a rap upon the door. The doctor's paper-thin voice would hardly make the cobwebs between Tommy's plastic fighter planes on the ceiling rattle. And he said,
"Hello? Is there anybody in there?"
He always said this. Now perhaps it was because he was sick of being sick, or that it was Christmas Eve. But Tommy yelled,
"No, there isn't!"
As the door opened, the doctor walked in and he said,
"Definitely nothing wrong with the old voice box. Can I come in?"
He always said this, and since he was already in the room and halfway to the bed before he'd finished saying it, Tommy thought that this was a pretty stupid thing to say, but then again, grown-ups can be pretty stupid most of the time anyway. Just as the door was closing, Tommy could see his mum giving him the look. The look that told him he'd better behave and no more nonsense would be stood for this night. Thomas Anthony Fohl. For somebody who was supposed to make people healthy, Dr. Hayes always looked ill, smelt of cigars and drink, and wheezed as if he was about to breathe his last. In one movement he plunked himself upon Tom's bed and reached into his black bag and said,
"Oh, let's see what we've got inside of here then."
Tommy knew already. Sharp scissors and knives, needles that took 3 men to stick into your arm, bottles with glass stoppers in, bottles of blood and bullets for biting on. He knew because he'd seen it in the cowboy pictures.
"Let's have a listen to your chest,"
said the doctor. Before he knew what had happened, Tommy's pyjama top was whisked up over his head, and with his arms waving uselessly in his sleeves, Dr. Hayes clamped his ice-cold stethoscope roughly onto Tommy's bare back. It took his breath away with surprise and shock, and not a little loss of dignity.
"Say ah!"
A feeble came from Tommy's lips. He was still stunned.
"Louder!" "Yes! Louder!"
Tommy screamed as loud as his body would let him.
All right,
The doctor said, hastily removing the stethoscope from his ears.
"There definitely doesn't seem to be anything wrong with your lungs."
Brilliant, thought Tom.
I could have told him that.
Dr. Hayes was blinking hard and obviously trying to readjust his ears to the room after this drum-bursting bombardment. With the little finger of his hairy hand placed in his ear, shaking and probing vigorously, he said,
"Let's have a look at your
Spots," said Tom. The doctor was bracing himself for another ear laceration as Tom spoke, and seemed pleasantly surprised that these words were spoken in a reasonable register.
"Yes, your
Spots," repeated Tommy. For a doctor, he didn't seem to know a lot about medicine.
"Yes, your
Very medical, thought Tom.
Good job it's nothing that needs urgent treatment. I'd be dead before he could tell anyone what's wrong.
Dr. Hayes allowed Tommy to regain his dignity. He lowered his arms and pulled his pyjamas into some semblance of order. The not knowing was unbearable, and just for a moment Tom was not sure as he looked hard into his face, but it looked as if the old doctor was asleep with his eyes open. He had always smelled like a pub whenever he'd come to see them, but this time, what with it being Christmas and all, he reeked like a brewery. Like an animal caught full in the headlights, Dr. Hayes seemed to snap into consciousness.
Yes, I'm afraid we're going to have to put something on your
Spots?
yes, your spots. A little drop of gentian violet and some iodine should do it, and I promise you, John.
Thomas!
Yes, Douglas, that this will be the last time. Take your pyjamas off.
This was the bit that Tommy hated more than anything. He didn't mind being painted from head to foot in gypsy's violence, or the great brown stains placed on him from the Igladine-soaked cotton wool, or even having his pyjamas off. It was just the way that Dr. Hayes kept mumbling and wheezing his foul breath into his face as he muttered,
Yes, just like a jelly baby.
if this was meant to make him feel better, it wasn't working. There was nothing to tell him that the doctor had finished. Tom had stood there motionless on the towel, eyes closed, mouth tight shut, barely breathing in the fumes. In fact, he couldn't tell which was the worst, the doctor's breath or the Igladine. The only way that he could tell that his ordeal was over was the sound of the bottles being replaced into the dreaded bag. He opened one eye, and then the other. If he had thought it had been bad in the past, it was nothing to the sight that now greeted his eyes. His skin was purple, with huge, inaccurately placed brown blobs on the red of his spots. He looked like a badly drawn leopard, and felt as bad as an 8-year-old boy can feel.
Yes, you're
The doctor looked hopefully into Tom's face, as if he were needing inspiration to finish his sentence.
I'm not telling him. I'm not telling him,
thought Tom, as he pulled his clothes back on.
Your spots should be all gone by tomorrow, so you won't be seeing me again. So have a nice
Christmas?
yes, Christmas. You're probably better off indoors, bad weather and all. You can hardly get stirred for children, sledging and throwing snowballs outside. You're much better off inside, Tim.
Tom!
Yes, whatever. Good, bye.
When the door closed and he was alone in his room, Tom buried his head into his pillow in anger, frustration and self-pity. He could hear the doctor's fragile but somehow newly audible voice saying,
Oh, yes, thank you. I don't mind if I do.
At least he could talk properly when drink was involved. In what seemed a very short time, it was either a very small drink, or the doctor was very thirsty. The front door closed, and he could hear his mother's familiar footsteps upon the stairs.